I will now call back to order Lake Forest Community High School District Board 115 Education for September 12th, 2023. May I have a roll call, please? Not need to. So we're out of workshop. If we could, please, could we all stand and give the pledges of allegiance, please?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So may I have a motion to adjourn into the 2023-2024 final budget hearing? May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. May I have a roll call vote?
Dr. Vinson,
Aye.
Mr. Burns,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Dr. Schabacher,
Aye.
Mr. Noble,
Aye.
Mr. Weinberner.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. So we're going to have Whitney give the report first, and then we'll do any comments thereafter. So if Whitney, I would turn it over to you to do give the 2023-2024 budget report for us.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just jump into some legal requirements here. So the district needs to approve the budget by September 30th of each year. And prior to the adoption, we need to put the tentative budget on display for 30 days and also schedule the public hearing and the date for when we're going to adopt the budget. After that, we also need to publish the notice of the public hearing in the newspaper. So on here we have just kind of a timeline on where we are with things. So July 28th was kind of a big day. We presented the preliminary budget to the Finance and Ops Committee. Prior to that, there was a lot of work that various people in the district were doing regarding staffing, enrollments, budget meetings with departments, all to get us to prepare the preliminary budget. Then August 8th, we brought the tentative budget to the board for approval. And at that time, we also set the public hearing date, which is today. And on August 9th, we published the public hearing notice in the newspaper. So from August 8th to September 7th, we were doing a lot of final details and adjustments. If we were getting some new information, which we'll go over some of the changes that happened from the tentative to the final budget that you have today. And today, September 12th, we are here at the budget hearing and hopefully approving the budget. Then from October to November, we will use the FY24 budget as our foundation to prepare the 5-year projections. Just taking a little snapshot in time as far as enrollment. This is something that is one of our budget drivers. So as of September 8th, we had 1,350 students enrolled at the high school. We still had a few pending registrations. And then we also like to share the District 67 enrollment figures, because all of these students will end up being in District 115 students. Do a quick overview on revenues. I'm going to give you a visual here.
Can I ask a quick question there?
Of course.
Is the other districts which feed into our high school district, are you seeing similar statistics, not just in 67?
I'm not sure about the 65's enrollment figures. At this time, we only have information on 67.
I can check with Lisa Leali. I'm going to text her right now, and then we can see what their trends are and include that in the board update, just so you can see it.
As far as revenues, we get our revenues from 4 different sources. We have local, state, federal, and some other. Our local revenue is primarily going to be our property taxes. We have some CPPRT, tuition fees. We had a big one this year with earning on investments. I'm sorry, last year, 23. Then we also have our state is going to be our evidence-based funding model. We also know that as general state aid. That's what it was called in the past. And some of our categorical payments in regards to our special education and our transportation. We also have the federal. This is our restricted grants where we have our title grants and our IDEA funding, whether it's flow through and room and board. Another thing that we do have on the other is our revenue from intergovernmental agreements and then also rental income. So for example, here at West Campus, we have rental income coming from Connections and Citadel. And then there is also some rental income at both campuses from park districts, other non-for-profits. We also rent out a cell tower at East Campus. And just as a visual here, you can see that a majority of our revenue is derived from property taxes, so we rely very heavily on our property taxes. That is part of our other local, but I wanted to make sure that we pull the property taxes out so that you can see how dependent we are on property taxes. With our property taxes, there's 2 installments. We have in June and in September. Normally, we have a collection rate of 99.8%. However, we like to be a little conservative and budget at 99.6%. This year, we're also looking to recapture about $197,000. That number up on the screen is also at the same collection rate of 99.6%. Our other local revenue was that 14% that I had spoken about. This pertains to our CPPRT, food service, investment earnings, facility rentals, pupil activities, and also the Little Scouts that are here at West Campus as well. And as far as major updates with state and revenue, at this point, we don't have any indication of proration or delayed payments. Regarding federal, we do get an indication early on about what our estimated what our grant allocations will be, so we're able to budget for that. Another thing that we put into our federal revenue is we have some carryover of our ESSER 3 and our ARP IDEA funds from FY23, so that was also carried over in our revenues. And one thing I did wanted to point out, even though it's not technically revenues, are our transfers. So if we're transferring any revenues from one fund to another, we are required to report it as either revenue or expenditure. So again, it's just moving funds from kind of one checkbook to another, and it is not true revenues that we're bringing in. That will be important to know as we continue to go through the rest of this. Then as far as expenditures, we'll just do a quick recap on these. We have to classify them as objects based upon our accounting standards that we're required to follow. And we'll just kind of do a quick visual here on the breakdown of that. So as you can see here, a large chunk of our expenditures are coming from salary and benefits at about 55%. However, it's also important to know that this is skewed a little bit because of shared service. So any of our shared service employees who have the home district of 67, their salaries and benefits are embedded in the purchase services, and that's because 115 is purchasing services from District 67. For our salaries, benefits, and termination benefits, when we go to budget for these, we're doing these on an individual basis. So we're taking the staffing reports, who's filled the position for the next year. We're also taking any vacancies. If we have any vacancies, we're kind of plugging a number in there on what our best guess is that that person will be hired at. So, because we know that we need a person in that position. Then, as far as our purchase services, supplies, capital outlays, other expenses, and tuition, we're looking at our historical and projected expenditures, departmental requests, planned initiatives, individual student needs, and the availability of funds, because we have to budget within our means. Just a quick glance at our staffing, as this is a big part of our expenditure budget. You can see back in 2019, we had 298.05 FTEs. Those are not people, because you can't have a 0.05. That is a percentage of a full-time position. So fast forward to 24, we're looking at having our FTE is going to be 306.73.
Before you move off this slide,
Yes.
when I look at the three buckets, I know that there's often confusion in the community about what gets characterized as admin. Can you talk about the different kinds of functional groups that are in that admin number?
So within the admin, you're going to have your cabinet members. You're going to have some of your administrators here at West Campus, but then you're also going to have your administrators at East Campus. So your principal, your assistant principals, and your department chairs.
Also part of admin are the instructional directors who both teach and have an administrative role, as well as the department chairs, as Whitney said.
And then I
Right,
would add,
and on those, just the FTE for those that are split, you're going to see just their admin FTE in that admin section. Their teacher FTE is going to be in the next section down under teachers.
and then I would add that the admin for the shared service personnel are being accounted for in the half position, or half of, and the other half is being billed to 67.
I appreciate all of that. One other thing. It is my understanding that depending on what district you are looking at, and we have sort of benchmark districts across the North Shore, that the way in which we characterize, for example, an instructional director who is somebody who teaches classes and has day-to-day interactions with the students may not be in the admin category for, I won't name the other districts.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I wasn't picking up right there what you were asking originally. So to your point, you're absolutely correct. There are multiple ways in which you can characterize personnel or FTE. We have tried to be explicitly clear on, from our perspective, what is an administrator and what isn't. There are some districts that would put their athletic director and put them under the teaching staff, or their instructional directors as department chairs solely, and label them but label them as teachers, which would then lower your admin total, and then also manipulate the admin to student ratio. So there's multiple ways to cut this. There's no right or wrong, but we try to label those individuals who are serving in an administrative role in the admin category, as opposed to labeling them in the teacher category.
I have a question too for maybe Aaron or Jeff. So the jump from 2021-22 to 22-23 in teacher assistants, I assume, is due to COVID.
We're fighting over who gets to address that. It's great. So teaching assistants are tied to special education needs. So as we have increasing special education needs and we put those students in certain classes and/or maybe they're just in a certain learning strategies environment, we would have to have a TA per some of their unique learning needs. So we would have an increase here. We've actually seen an increase in our needs at transitions as well, and they would be counted in our total. We would have an increase in exceptional learning needs of students with special services.
Okay.
Because the folks who were hired for COVID were hourly, right, as opposed to becoming staff. This is really more a reflection, this line item is a reflection of least restrictive environment.
I don't believe we have any of the COVID hirees that we had in the original ESSER at all represented anymore.
Not anymore. I was just trying to understand why the number didn't go down afterwards. So, but that explains it.
Yeah,
So,
it's based off the.
Okay, some other assumptions that we put into our staffing side is currently we are in the middle of negotiating with our LFEA. At this point, we have a 0.1 open FTE with our support service group. Their contract ends in FY27. This year, they received a 5% increase, and at this point, we have 7.1 open FTE. Within our administrative and confidential group, our administrators received an average increase of 4.5%. Confidentials received an average increase of 4%. And at this point, we have 0.5 open FTE. So as mentioned earlier, for any of these open FTEs, we did put a budget in there as we do need those positions filled. I am going to push this slide over to Jeff real quick to talk about TAs and ESPs.
And I think Dr. Lennart mentioned this a little bit. We are down 2.33 teaching assistants and ESPs from last year. It is determined by student need. And as we looked at District 67 in terms of forecasting, do we see this rising or falling? We don't see any trend that in the future we're going to have to account for more or fewer. It really comes down to specific student needs. So from a forecasting standpoint, there are no major District 67 initiatives. Not sure about 65, but there are none that I know of that would impact that.
While there's a lot of different things that go into the budget, some highlights are going to be the strategic plan that we are working on. Also under technology, we have the MacBook integrations and classroom and computer lab infrastructure to support the MacBooks. We are also continuing to upgrade our wired and wireless networks. And in addition to that, we're working on security software licenses. Under communications, both districts are working on annual reports for mailing to all Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, and Knollwood residents. We're also doing an Our Story video for online distribution and posting onto the website. There are, with our facilities and our operations, there's a few major things going on. So I put each one of them on their own slide so that we can really distinguish. We have the $15 million borrow that if you have been driving around at either campus, you've seen a lot of work going on. We have windows, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, door replacements, paving, parking, roofing repairs. We have our transition renovations here for our transition students, and also the facilities garage. So again, this was all approved in December of 2021 and completely separate from the referendum work that we're doing. This slide here is about the referendum work. So in the tentative budget, you did see that we put $105.7 million in the revenue section of the budget. We also carried that through here. So this referendum, we have for our instructional space infrastructure and building infrastructure. This is what we told the community we were going to spend the funds on if it was approved, and it was approved. And so what you'll see moving forward from the tentative budget and until the referendum projects are completed is you will see us separating out the referendum work from any other capital projects that are happening. This way we can be transparent in where we are with the referendum work. This is something that you will see for multiple years because it's going to take multiple years to complete the $105.7 million worth of capital work. So as we jump in, here you can see right under revenues, that last line, we have the referendum funds separated out. Under expenditures, we have a similar thing, but we only have $2 million, and that's going to be utilized for planning. Then your capital projects, that is part of your $15 million. You're going to see a large chunk of that in our expenditures at $11 million. So this budget summary is all funds, kind of all in. So if we look down at the bottom, it looks like we're in great shape at $94 million for this year. That kind of skews things because we all know that the referendum and the $15 million needs to be spent on the capital projects that we said we were going to spend it on. So what I did here is I pulled out the capital projects to get a better view on where we're really sitting at the end of, we're expecting to sit at the end of FY24 with a positive, hopefully a positive impact to the fund balance of about $120,000 when we take out our capital projects. And
Whitney, one question on that. Does that include transfers? Is transfers in those numbers as well?
transfers are in those numbers. Yeah.
Okay, so even that's the 58.5 is higher than what actually the revenue and expenses are. Do you have a guesstimate as to what the transfer amounts are?
Yes, so I have a slide later on that will pull out the
Yep.
transfers on the operating funds. So just to highlight a few things here as far as what changed from the tentative budget, we did get a updated estimate from the state of Illinois on our CPPRT. Unfortunately, this one we had to decrease by about $121,000 in our ed fund. So that is a difference that you'll see from tentative to the final budget. On our state budget form, you'll see some updated fund balance and cash balances. And then those were really the only major changes from tentative to final. And then, David, this is kind of what you were looking for. This is just our operating funds. And so you'll see that on the 24 side, even the 23, you're going to see what the budget is, but then you'll also see the transfer out of the operation and maintenance. You don't see the transfer in because this is just operating funds. The transfers in are going to the debt service and the capital projects. And so here you can see we're at a 4.6% increase on our revenues, and without the transfers, we're at a 2.47% increase on our expenditures. Also looking at operating funds, just so we can get a multi-year view, we kind of pulled everything out. And so we can see the increases that from FY23 to FY24, similar thing that we just saw on the other page, but you can kind of see that we're kind of steadily growing a little bit with our revenues and our expenditures.
I have one question on
Yes.
that past slide. For professional services, that line item, does that include legal fees?
It does.
And has that been one of the drivers of the increase of the 6.8%?
I don't know if it's been one of the drivers, but it's definitely been an increase.
What, did you want to say something, Matt?
Yes, that has been an increase and contributing to the drivers,
Thank you.
of course.
So as far as next steps, today, hopefully, we will approve the final budget. And after that, we will be able to use the FY24 budget as our baseline for our 5-year projections. And that is all I have, so if there's any questions.
Are there any other questions from the group? All right. So at this moment in time, I would invite anybody from public, for the public participation for the budget hearing specifically. So if there are members of the public who would like to address the board on the budget topic itself, this would be the correct time. We will not be voting on this until we come back into the regular meeting and leaving the budget hearing. So is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this topic? Right. Seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn the 2023-2024 final budget hearing?
So moved.
May I have a second? Thank you. May I have a voice vote, please? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I will now call back to order the regular meeting in the Lake Forest Community High School District 115 Board of Education meeting for September 12th, 2023. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Weinberner?
Here.
Dr. Vincent?
Here.
Mr. Noble?
Here.
Dr. Schaubacher?
Here.
Mr. Burns? Ms. Davis?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So I'll start with the President's report, and then we'll jump in. So good evening, and I want to say a quick thank you to the fellow board members for coming so early today and covering some of the materials we needed to cover. So before we jump in, I don't usually write this much, but there's a few, so if you could be patient with me. I do want to cover a few areas in summary to what the meeting today, but I want to first take a moment to reflect on yesterday on 9/11. I was glad to see Dr. Montgomery's email note and his reminder to all of us yesterday to have the conversation with our children and to remember. For me personally, I was in LA on that day. A business meeting that morning with my trip, in theory, taking a flight to New York City that afternoon for a presentation the following morning, September 12th in mid-Manhattan. But before any of that could happen, I was woken up a call from my wife. She woke me up and said, "Turn on the TV." And so I did. Seeing what I saw, I did not know anything, but I was fairly certain life would be different going forward for so many. After the attack and my calls to many people over the next couple hours, I needed and basically wanted to get home. And so like so many, I just tried to figure out a pattern to get there from LA. So I spent the next 4 days basically finding a way home and driving back to Chicago. I do not have any heroic stories of the events and what went on. Just another person listening to the news constantly, working through the uncertainty and the tragedy, and asking many of the questions we all asked on that day. My emotions ran every which way, and all I thought was the impact that this would have on the families of so many and what the future would be for them and all of us. So I would like to take a moment to say thank you to the men and the women who continue to serve and volunteer in our armed services, as well as those that in the countless public service positions and workers who make our community what it is and to protect and serve us every day. I so personally want to say thank you so very much. Regarding service, I would like also to mention another event that happened this weekend. It happened to be the memorial service that was held this past Friday in Lake Forest for Marilyn Lovell. Marilyn is the wife of astronaut Captain Jim Lovell. It was a wonderful service, and I wish the Lovell family all the best through this time of love and remembrance. It often comes to my mind when I think of service, risk, sacrifice, the Lovell story, and the fellow astronauts, and all of that we saw through news, books, movies that have passed our eyes over these years. And as I thought of them and I thought of 9/11 and the past and the history, what was floating in my head over the last several days is how should I feel and what should I share in terms of my thoughts. And I think of what should I tell my children about the past and what is the way forward. How does this relate to our community and the students? So my selfish answer or my particular answer, and yours can certainly be different, but I wanted to think in one particular way that we name the names and we tell their stories. and we live the fullest with courage and passion, utilizing all the gifts that have been bestowed upon us. And in that small way, I do feel we honor the past and the true sacrifices of so many. On to the board workshop, which we just covered. So regarding some of the discussions from our workshop, as well as some of the action items we'll be covering, I wanted to share a little bit. And regarding one that we covered very briefly, a special little call out to Melissa Oakley, who's talked about an overview of our communications and a strategy going forward. And so what she has done, it's been so impressive, is that we're building on existing efforts to better reach the community. And this is something she's done with purpose since she stepped into the role. We're looking to both expand and develop more ways to share both and make ourselves accessible to the whole community about the trusted investments the district receives. It is with these dollars that we are responsible for being proper stewards and answering to the community about our financial and operational choices being made and the rationale behind them. Also asking and answering how we are helping shepherd the students in their journey of learning in the best possible and most economical way. There are always limited resources and therefore choices and trade-offs that must be considered. Secondly, we talked a lot and significantly around metrics and finances. And this was, we covered addressing the next step in the work that began some year and a half ago with the Portrait of a Learner. Learning metrics are now upon us and a deeper dive beyond where we live today. And as context, this was an important part of the to-do list, the job duties we gave Dr. Montgomery when we hired him to lead the district. These metrics are the next level step forward from the publicized state report card that other learning and survey metrics that we've been using. So how can we use these? How do we get to a deeper dive? The school has always looked and measured the work that each student does, but rolling these results up and linking them in a way to measure the school does not exist like one would think and look at a business. The matrix of possible success outcomes and summarization to a single value of measurement is extremely difficult, to say the least. Our effort is to focus on the measuring the individual growth of each student and allow us the potential to examine through the lens of learning the success of our school and be an example to how other schools can maybe measure their own growth. The more we focus on the student growth, the closer we can be to properly assisting and supporting each student in their journey of learning. My personal belief is that if students can find something that they deeply care about, a passion, as I commonly say, the more I believe they will become hungry for the knowledge to feed that desire. Providing that opportunity for learning and discovery is, in my view, the key. No metric or metrics will be perfect, but a deeper view of personal performance and a continued focus on growth versus static and generalized measured outcomes is a strong, welcome start to a tired history of rankings that shed little insight to future decisions and investments and choices we must make for students. Our board's commitment to this community is that we will continue to spend the time needed to help govern the valuable resources we have been entrusted with in the most responsible way possible. So thank you. And I will pass it on to Dr. Montgomery.
Well done, Mr. Noble. I want to take a moment and just share gratitude before I begin with the board, who graciously showed up at 4:30 to start our workshop. Often the work that they do, the partnership that they offer is not seen, not taped. They are here at the ready whenever for a phone call or a conversation, and the hours that they give are often undocumented, and I just want to offer my sincere appreciation for their thought partnership as we proudly serve this community. The topics that I'm going to cover tonight, and I'm going to try to keep this brief, if I can, I'm going to try. So don't be afraid by the number of topics that are listed. I'm going to quickly talk on the strategic plan, the bond sale, capital projects, rating perspectives, and John eloquently talked about how much we should put investment in rankings, and then finish with a highlight that I had personally with LFHS reads. The strategic plan update, John referenced, and I'm just going to foreshadow it with you. In workshop, We had consultants, we had members from the administration at 115 come together and present to the board metrics that we are going to use to evaluate and to track our progress in the first year of this 5-year strategic plan. And the Board of Education thoughtfully asked questions and wonderings for us to come back and offer another iteration in 2 weeks for their consideration. And ultimately, 2 weeks following that, I will recommend to the Board of Education the metrics that we will use to determine our success for this school year that we are in right now. So when you think about the topics that we're partnering on, the board feedback is paramount to ensure that we're hitting the mark as administrators and that we are serving the community well, given that the community came together and created the portrait of a learner as well as the strategic plan. And now we're charged with now what, so what? How do we accomplish all these wonderful things that are put forth in these plans? So please know that that was presented in open workshop tonight. And also please expect, as promised, a recommendation to the board in the October meeting that you will be able to see the full metrics and action steps that we have to actualize what this community set forth 2 years ago with the adoption of the Portrait of a Learner. Bond sale, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in my report, but you're going to hear an awful lot about it tonight. So we have our municipal advisor, Liz Hennessy, with us. She will be sharing some insight. The board will be thoughtfully engaging in questions, and then ultimately we will be asking for some resolutions to take action around the bond sale of the $105.7 million referendum that was passed in April of this year. Capital projects along the same line, in addition to obtaining the monies that are in the referendum, we have created a capital project advisory committee that has met 2 times to date, and these are community volunteers who have put applications and resumes forward to help govern us in an advisory capacity over the next 4 to 5 years as this project unfolds. The next meeting is October 17th, and the focus of that discussion is going to be the historic windows, and we're going to learn everything and talk everything windows, which is a hot topic in the community. I will tell you that in the 2 months from August until October 17th, I have requested each capital advisory meeting or advisory committee member to meet one-on-one with myself and a board member. John Noble has taken those meetings to date. We've met with 4 of them so far, and we have how many more left? 4 more. So Jenny gets some as well. So we have 8 members, and we are meeting with them one-on-one primarily to get their individual motivations and expertise to make sure we're hitting the mark with what their hopes and aspirations are with this committee. So speaking to board involvement, John sat with me for 2 hours today at Hansa Coffee, and we had the pleasure of getting insights from 2 members and 2 separate meetings. So those are happening. We are going to use the first few meetings to hit the hot topic issues. The next major topic that we want to talk is how do we want to look at geothermal? How do we want to look at solar panels? How do we want to look at energy initiatives and have a real deep discussion around where we think we can land on all of the green initiatives. So we will be picking those hot topic issues to tackle early on to try to get some insight and some ideas as the project unfolds. Rankings perspective. I have a great deal of thoughts, but I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on it. It is hard for me to put much credence in rankings. This year, every year that Lake Forest is ranked, they do well. We do well. So last year, you may have heard, oh my gosh, the schools are failing. This year, I've heard, I did hear that. Let me not say may. I did hear that, Matt, you're failing schools. This year, I heard, my gosh, Matt, this is the best thing ever happening to us, and we're so successful. We moved 2 spots. And we are on average at the top 1.5% of both selective and non-selective in the country. So we're 228th in the nation. We will likely be in the top 1.5 to 2% in the nation every time the U.S. World and News Report rates us. So forgive me for, while this year we moved up a few, we're third in the state among non-selective. That's great news. Last year we were fifth. I was proud of that too. But that's not what is in our Portrait of a Learner. That's not what's in our strategic plan. And I assure you that the U.S. News and World Rankings are not in the metrics that you will see in October. So please, while we're happy that we're doing well in these, last month you heard me talk about 1 to 14% of student test score are attributed to schools. The rest is to out-of-school factors. I shared that factoid with you last month. So we can't do this alone. So while we do well, that means our families are doing well. That means our community is doing well. That means that all of the people that come around the whole village mentality of raising children come together, which ensures that we will often be among the highest across the country. And we're not settling, because if we were settling, we wouldn't have a strat plan and a portrait and metrics. So we are in a state of continual improvement, and excellence is the common denominator. That is the standard that we use, but we are not going to rest our laurels on anything that we are working on in this district, and I'm proud that that is a reality, and I'm proud the board supports that. And it would be far more easy, as well as less controversial, if this board and the administration and the staff said, we're just going to do status quo and continue to celebrate all the wonderful things that are happening and not be engaging in continual improvements. That's the easier path. So I'm proud that this district is moving towards challenging the norms, critically thinking through and wondering about how we can continue to improve in spite of our success, because of our success. The last thing is just, this is a proud dad moment and proud superintendent moment. The Summer Reads program, where students and staff partner and read books over the summer. I had the privilege of partnering with my daughter in selecting a book, and we had incoming freshmen read the book In the Wild Light. There was many different groups that are happening. I am a self-proclaimed bibliophile, so being able to read with my daughter and a group of her friends and discuss it was a joy for me, and it'll be something that I'm hoping to do every year moving forward, in spite of the proud dad moment that I had, and she humored me, so I was most grateful as a father of a teenager. So thank you for that, and that includes my superintendent's report.
Queued up. All right. Thank you, Dr. Montgomery, and thank you for participating in LFS Reads. I know that that's an awesome program many of our staff members and students take advantage of. We're going to reverse the order a little bit tonight because it's gotten a little bit late. But just to set a little bit of context, this year's spotlights, we've decided to move in a little bit of a different direction. We want to focus on community organizations and parent partnerships and how they help to impact the quality of student life at Lake Forest High School. We believe that sharing and leadership and culture building is the responsibility of every single person in our school community. And we also know and we also believe that we have many, many partners we can feature who are getting the word out, who are loving being a scout, and we want to do this and thank them in the most public way. And our very first Impact Spotlight for this school year, and I think that this is a really fitting first Impact Spotlight, is none other than the committee representing our young adults, AKA CROIA. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce CROIA's director, Todd Nahigian. Yay! Todd, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. And this is to forward. Okay. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful thing to be here tonight. I spent the last week with COVID, so that's why I'm wearing a mask now. Definitely excited to share with you the fun things and exciting things we're doing at CROIA. I'll first say I have some treats for you guys. They're free t-shirts that have been designed by the students and our staff over the years as a promise that I needed to fulfill to Melissa, because over the summer she asked if they could have some merch. And so you're all going to benefit from that promise. And there's lots of different styles of shirts and different sizes. And if one of them doesn't fit you, we'll get it right. I've also got a book that we published back in 2020 that was the 40th anniversary of Croya, story about all the things that we've been doing over 40 years. And then I brought a few copies of our Empowering Teens text, which was written by a staff member that shadowed us 20 years ago and was able to put this to a text to provide other communities that wanted to grow and develop a community-based youth organization, the manual how to. So I love to get started. I'm Todd Nahigian. I've been at Croya since 1995. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology at Miami University in Ohio and went on to get a master's degree in clinical psychology from the Illinois School of Professional Psychology in Chicago. I grew up in Northfield, not far from here, and made many trips to Lake Forest over the years as my grandparents lived here, as my grandfather was an associate pastor at First Presbyterian Church. So I've had a fond connection to Lake Forest, plus now most of my life has been spent here working at Croya. All right. I'm here to talk about the impact Croya has on Lake Forest High School and the community. But I would guess, and I would suggest, that the Croya impact is just about the same as Lake Forest High School's impact on Croya, because we can't function without each other. We love the groups that we work with. This is a picture from this morning when we were in room 109 for our Croya board meeting with a bunch of our executive students. Chris Carr is our chairman, who's back here, her son Matt, and my staff member Rick Day, all part of these groups that we've been part of over the years. And just wanted to show you, these are the kinds of things that are happening all the time behind the scenes. We not only met at the school today, but the APT met at Croya on Thursday. So there's a lot of support both ways. Croya's values, we determined a number of years ago, were a much better way than trying to teach rules and telling kids that they were breaking a rule. We said, you're going to uphold the values of Croya, or else we're going to have a problem. We're going to have to talk to your parents or deal with it. Acceptance, respect, empathy, and accountability. Croya is a safe area for all. It's really been a monumental piece that we've changed a number of years ago that really has been a positive influence for us. All right. Real quick, those executive committee members that we shared, that we were with this morning for our meeting, shared with us during the meeting some of their favorite things about Croya. And I'd be remiss if I didn't share some of the thoughts from the youth while I'm here tonight. A number of them were things like a true sense of community and inclusiveness, which reminded me of those Croya values. The ability to meet different groups of people who I would otherwise never have met. The opportunity to grow close to so many friends. The support from the trusted Croya staff. The leadership opportunities with retreats and the executive committee members. The Wednesday night youth meetings are a great way to break up a long week. The retreats that we go on are a great way to learn more about ourselves and others, and how welcome I feel when I arrive at Croya, which made me think of the place where you belong at Illinois and McKinley Street, the mural that Tommy Quinn did, alumni of Lake Forest High School, in partnership with Carolyn Bielski, art teacher at Lake Forest High School a few years back. We're very proud of it. It's been there. It's really an honor to have worked with the city of Lake Forest High School, and the students to put this together. Okay, so some of the things that we're doing currently that you might think of or you might immediately wonder about Croya. We do community service projects all throughout the year. The summer is an incredibly strong time of community service because we have kids that are coming who aren't at school or on vacation or at work or in camp, and we basically take them around the community and do all sorts of projects. The leadership activities that we do are our executive committee meetings, as well as our retreats in the fall and spring. The weekly youth meetings are Tuesdays for middle school kids, but then we have Wednesday nights every week for high school kids. Our after-school drop-in hours, every day after school, we have 2 hours, 3 hours on Monday for the early release for Deer Path, where kids can come over after school and play games, get a snack, mingle with friends, get help with homework like they did today, and have all sorts of fun tournaments and games. Our social events are really well attended. Something like Battle of the Bands is a good example. We work very closely with Lake Forest High School to host the Battle of the Bands at the high school. One of our staff, Rick Day, works closely with Corey Homer and Steve Douglas with new media and the tech crew in order to make sure that everybody's involved and we've got all sorts of expertise funneling to a wonderful project. We have a music school in the basement of Croya, and we have lessons that happen 3 days a week, and then the support system. The support system, to me, I think is probably where I was drawn most to Croya, and that's the psychological aspect, that's the background that I have, and one of the things that really makes a difference to me is being able to be there for these students in a time of need. And I think that when you talk about a village mentality, a community mentality, that is what Croya provides. We have worked with communities all over the country to talk about how to create something like this. At the end of the day, you need people, and you need funding, and you need resources. And all of that comes together with the drive and the love and the care for the students, and that's why it's lasted 43 years, being created in 1980. All right, some of the things that we directly impact programs and support at Lake Forest High School. We do our peer training class, which trains 100 students per year. It's 6 classes during each semester for about 11 weeks, once a week. We follow a Carl Rogers humanistic psychology background of theory, and that's the empathy, the unconditional positive regard, the genuineness, active listening, problem solving. There's some other things that we do when we talk to kids. When you get into trouble as a kid, or you know that your friends are in trouble, what do you do? How do you get those kids support? And what do you do when the support that's needed is over your head? And who do you go to in that situation? We have all sorts of referrals that we make to the social workers at Lake Forest High School and to the deans and administrators, but also we're working with these kids behind the scenes or at lunch or at the peer training classes in order to make sure they're getting the support that they need. We're also really strongly supporting parents as we go through these things as well. Our peer advanced curriculum development we've been working on for years. We're excited to bring that back. That was a pre-COVID thing, and we're looking forward to helping the social workers develop that, which is a peer group model where students actually lead their own classes without adults in them, and then they have even a better opportunity to build rapport and talk about issues that they're facing at school. We do the study break tables for the final exams weeks, and then we support the wellness walk, the scout experience, the talent show, homecoming, and summer film camp. So there's an endless amount of times that our staff overlaps with the staff at the school, but what we love about it is that so many of the kids that are really, really involved at Croya are also major leaders at Lake Forest High School. Our staff has gone out of our way to attend many of the APT meetings throughout the year. We have one staff member that attends the high school APT meetings. I attend the executive APT meetings. We have community liaison meetings that we attend, which has been really important for us to be part of a broader picture of support for the community. And then also, we had 2 members of our staff on the strategic planning committees, one for District 67 and one for 115. So there's been a lot of ways that we've overlapped, which is awesome. Our networking, we make hundreds of student contacts to provide youth with support throughout the year. Our Croya staff also provides the support to the parents, as I mentioned. And then we also work directly with the NSSRA, the Special Education Association, in order to provide inclusion companions for students to attend the Croya programs. And that happens throughout the year, not just through the school year, but also in the summer. All right, by the numbers, Croya provides over 370 programs and meetings for high school and middle school students throughout the year, with over 10,000 participants throughout the school year. So what we're getting at is there are multiple things happening at Croya per day. That could be in the schools, that could be in our facility, that can be off-site. We have a 15-passenger van that we take kids on trips to do different service projects, and all sorts of fun things that we do. But it's, at the end of the day, Croya is by and for the students. And so what our goal is as the trusted helpers is to make sure that these students are getting their needs met. What is it that they're interested in? What are they excited about? And what do they want to do? And we talk about spark. We talk about get that special idea about something that's important to you. There was a student back in the 90s that was a chairman of Croya, and she told me the quote that I thought was the coolest thing ever. She said, teenagers' responsibility and their psychological stage of development goal is to find that one thing or two things about them that make them special, that make them excited about life, that make them passionate to get up in the morning and want to be something better than they were yesterday, all the while fitting in with the group. And I thought that was a perfect way of explaining what we try to do at Croya, is to help everybody become an individual, but also know that you're included and you belong and you're welcome. We have 90 high school students attend each of our Croya fall and spring retreats, probably our most meaningful trips throughout the year. We spend months planning for those, and we get high school alumni, college alumni, to come back and help us chaperone those to be able to take that many students to one site. I'd like to thank you all for me being here tonight. We're always welcome to show you around Croya. I've got the t-shirts for you and some of the books. Anytime you need questions answered, people will say, kids will say, Croya is a parent-free zone, but it's not. It's only parent-free like from 3:30 to 5:30 when they don't want you coming in, but you're always welcome. We'd love to have time for you to come over and see what we do, and then if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nahigian. And I've got Todd. I just have to say, one of my favorite memories when I first moved to Lake Forest and I became a scout, I was invited to the tie-dye, we were tie-dyeing shirts.
Yes.
And I got to meet some awesome students who, to this day, one of them is now a member of my advisory council and a senior. But I was just so impressed with just the communication these students had, and we were still coming out of COVID and masking, the communication skills they had, the passion that they had, how much they loved Croy, and I'd never seen an organization like this in a community. So thank you. I commend your hard work since 1995. I know your team's been there a long time as well, which speaks volume about you and our students. So we appreciate the presentation, and you are impacting
I'd
us.
be remiss if I didn't say that Matt was with you at the tie.
Oh, yes.
Making tie-dye shirts in a suit.
That sounds like, at the time, I was like, oh, boy. That sounds like Dr. Montgomery. Todd, I invite you and your team to come up and take a picture with our board.
Awesome. Love to. Come on, guys.
All right. We've decided that I have a loud microphone voice, so we're going to work on backing up. What a great impact spotlight, and what a great way to kick off. So I'm excited to see what else many of our other organizations bring and show that they've been doing for
Will we
Scouts.
be getting merch from all of
I don't know
the
about
other-
merch, but I did bring a little something today as a demo. But my principal's report for September, here we are. It already feels like fall outside, and we're already several weeks into the school year, and it's hard to believe. Honestly, today we had a little event, with that exception. It's felt about as close to a normal school year for me as possible, and as close to normal as it's felt in many years, and we are all very thankful for that. I was actually sharing last night with a parent. It's almost feels like, wow, there should be something going on, and then today, but we got through that. All right, so for my, do I have the, oh, here we go. All right, I have several updates. The opening of schools went super smoothly. We have a new process for textbook and MacBook pickup, and I've heard from a number of parents and students that it was the best and most streamlined that they've ever experienced. They were able to get their materials very quickly. So a big shout out to Frank Lesniak, who is our newest AP, Donna Labatola, Elizabeth Delfalva, Jordan Salas, and his team who coordinated our new way that we are picking up textbooks. I know that it was something that was very well received. The energy on our institute days, and those are sort of the teacher, professional, and staff professional development days, it was palpable. Our very own John Noble took some time to welcome the faculty and staff to the start of the school year alongside Superintendent Montgomery. We've worked really hard at Lake Forest to build out a shared leadership. We've talked about distributive leadership here in this room, and that model is really a commitment to just a shared understanding among faculty members, staff members, and administration of what our goals and areas for improvement should be. And it was evident on those institute days that it is alive and well and thriving because so many of our teacher leaders were actually the ones on stage, not the administrators, who were in the conversation, engaging the conversation, and really talking about the shared vision. It was wonderful to see. The first day at Lake Forest High School is always a lot of fun. I can say always because it's my third one. Balloons and ice cream, grateful students, and I always stand out and I wave the students in and the parents in who are in the kiss and ride, and we always have super grateful parents as well. Is it called kiss and ride here? I've been told that that's a, no, it's not. It's the parent drop-off.
They have that at
Kiss
the
and
airport.
ride, they do. I thought so. Sometimes people look at me and go, what is that?
Let's keep
That is
moving.
an East Coast thing. We actually experienced that same gratitude at ninth grade orientation. Our new freshmen were clapped in. That is a big tradition of ours. They're clapped out their senior year at the Wellness Walk. We do lots of clap outs throughout the course of the year. And it was just fun because they were affirming themselves as scouts, and it's really special to see. So a big shout out to Maggie Harmson and Becca Inyukai for arranging that awesome ninth grade orientation. A couple of celebrations. We had our annual senior one-acts, and really to me, that's like the kickoff event of the school year. I loved this year's one-acts. The shows were funny. We had some really funny shows. We had some creative shows. We had some shows that really challenged me, challenged my thinking as well, and then we had so much more. Shout out to Corey Holmer and Sarah Dreiling for their hard work on those one-acts, and to all of our student thespians who participated. It was fun seeing so many of our new scouts, our ninth grade scouts, who were already engaged in the school community and acting on stage as well. So it was great. Fall sports are in full swing, and I actually had my very first senior night last night. And it was girls golf. It was cold and it was rainy, but we were still able to celebrate those senior students who are graduating and enjoying their very last season. Thursday is a football game against Libertyville High School. I'll be there. I think a lot of people will be there. It should be a lot of fun. And then next week, all of our students and our sports will be celebrating homecoming. Go Scouts. We have lots of fun events and traditions that we're planning to include. Here's my prop. The staff will have these new nifty t-shirts, but it gets better because you'll never guess, on the back, SAT words, different SAT words. We're taking I know, a little cheesy, staff member came with this, but we're taking every advantage that we possibly can. Notice it is by no coincidence, mine is Apex on the back of mine, so. But we thought it might be fun, and then the students can be like, what's this one's word and that one's word, and maybe learn something along the way. So we take every opportunity to teach and learn. A couple of final updates and reminders. I started a student weekly email this year. It's called Happy Monday Scouts, and I did that, and that was a direct response to students saying, so you have the Fan Scout, and we know we can read it, and we know that you do things for staff, but where is our message every week? So I'm working hard on that, and I wanted it to be something different. This has been a stretch goal for me for years, I might try to venture into some video, but I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'm a little nervous to do the video, but it's good to step outside your comfort zone. I'm hoping that, I also wanted to remind you and remind the community that I do the Fan Scout every week, and that is the community messaging that I use, and I count on the community to send me things to help me make sure that I'm representative of everyone and all the students too. And I'm actually planning something with Dr. Montgomery that's going to be a little unique for me and for Lake Forest High School next month. It's going to involve community stakeholders. We're going to host it at Lake Forest, and I hope to be reporting on that in October or November, so more to come on that. And finally, I spoke last month about two very big anchors to our work. Let me get ready. This year, our principles of respect and our learner expectations. So I just put those up there. Maybe you've seen these already. I've been putting them in the Fan Scout. I put them in the Happy Monday Scouts. So I've reiterated these, but I want to share the posters with you. These are up in our hallways. These are up in our classrooms. And you're going to hear me reference these a lot throughout the year because they are the product of so many student interviews, so many staff interviews. It's really the synthesis of data. I've asked and will continue to ask that our entire community at large reinforces these expectations as we really believe that these are the life skills that all of our scouts should have. And this, a heartfelt thank you to Steve Dunn, Kristen Carlson, Jeff Summey, Katie Pausch, Jen Thomas, John Waniger, and Peter Lubliner, who worked tirelessly last summer to analyze all that focus group feedback and distill it back into these learner expectations and these principles of respect. We're looking forward to more focus groups and more opportunities to grow and share in our vision in the coming years. It is going to be a great year. Go Scouts. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. At this point in time, before we jump into some of the committee reports and an additional report I think Matt has coming up, the board will look at any public participation. So the board will now hear public comment subject to our policy. Board of Education welcomes public attendance and participation at all meetings. It is hoped by utilizing these guidelines, participation will be maximized in both the terms of fairness and organization. There will be two opportunities for public participation. This opportunity is limited to only the items listed on this evening's agenda. So if you do have items or topics outside of this, I'd please ask you to hold those till after. There will be a second opportunity for public participation later in the meeting. So at this moment, are there any members of the public who would like to address the board at this time? All right. Seeing none, I will turn it back to Matt for the Student Services Executive Summary. So Matt and Aaron, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Noble. Aaron and I are going to tag team this presentation. We are going to provide a slide deck and overview of thank you so much, T. The Student Services Report, and then so the public knows and viewers knows, tomorrow morning, Mrs. Oakley and her team will be releasing a letter from me and the full executive summary to the community, and I think that's scheduled around 10 a.m. Tomorrow morning. So know that you're going to get an overview, 20,000-foot view, and then tomorrow at 10 a.m. we'll email a letter to the community as well as an attachment with the report to make sure that we are sharing this information with everyone. So I'm going to start with the SWOT analysis of some key takeaways from Dr. Cates' report. And for those who don't know, SWOT is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. A couple items, I'll start with the strengths. And the strengths that Dr. Cates highlighted in the Student Services Report are the power of our core teams, the peer mentoring programs we have. He honed in a big way on our MTSS and the programs that we're doing for the multi-tiered student supports, as well as the partnership-driven initiatives that are in place. Some of the weaknesses he highlighted in his analysis particularly are around systems and protocols that need to be developed with a special focus on the need to increase by a tenfold the parent and guardian communication that we are offering as partners with our parents and guardians as we work together to serve our students. Opportunities, he identified, and Aaron will go through, short-term and long-term actionable steps, and then an ongoing short-term and long-term actionable steps. I don't know if I said that clearly, forgive me. And then threats. This was an undercurrent that he wanted to make sure that we continue to be mindful of, which is in the face of the mental health crisis that we're experiencing around the country. There is a increasing demand for mental health and student services, and those needs need to continue to be taken very seriously as we support our students and our families. As a little bit of background, this is a topic that Aaron and I quickly agreed upon early in our tenure, which was the need to, our desire to audit and enhance the services. We wanted to have this looked at from an outside entity, an impartial entity of everything that we are offering within LFHS. And for those of you who don't remember, Aaron and I started our tenure at the same time. Aaron was the first hire that I had the privilege of, and she will tell you that my best hire ever. Just ask her, which I would agree with. Yeah, little joke there. I do agree with that, though. And she would say that. So Aaron and I started in the same year. This is our third year. And when we were looking at all of the robust services that LFHS has to offer, we wanted to have another person, another set of eyes on this to see what are we doing really well, what are our opportunities, and what our weaknesses are. So I'm really proud that the board supported this idea, and what you're hearing tonight is the byproduct of a long journey to get to the point to release this report tomorrow. I can't overstate this, which is the theme for this year, which is a place for everyone. So our focus remains the same this year and all years, and each and every individual student is valued and important, and their journey is of the utmost importance, and how we are navigating their journey with all the supports, both externally and internally, is paramount to this work. This is a normal improvement cycle, so this slide right here could be applied to everything we're working on in a whole bunch of areas. So once when Aaron talks about the awareness for area of growth, know that we are applying this cycle here, but we're also applying this cycle to all kinds of areas of improvement that we're working on in the district. So you have the audit and review. You will hear tonight the high impact areas to students that we need to address, the research and the next steps, the best practices that we're putting in place, and then a continual need. 5 is ongoing. So while we're releasing this report tonight and we're giving you current states and next steps, this is an ongoing feedback loop to ensure that we are never arriving. We want to make sure that we're continually to improve. So this cycle could be applied to our metrics and our strategic plan cycle. It could be applied to, I'm thinking of another topic that we're working on. Let's if you look at the referendum and how we're continuing to develop those plans, it'll be iterative in nature. At this time, I'm handing the baton, so to speak, over to Dr. Lennart. And are you okay with me holding this, or can you tell me when to clip or click? Okay.
All right, so we have several things to go over. The most dense portion of my section will actually be on the next couple of slides. But I just want to open by saying, when you think about that improvement cycle, I mean, I can just, in my tenure here, think about our student rights and responsibilities from code and conduct, student opt-outs, and the robust process that we built out, the book reconsideration. It seems like we continually are looking for opportunities to grow the procedures that we have in place. So one of his chief findings was just that we have procedural shortcomings that we need to make sure that we are building in processes to address those. And so with the immediate focus of our procedural shortcomings being refining our current processes, and a big one, communicating with our parents and our caregivers at those very key pivotal points in any process that we have in student services. And then another big flag that came up was that the partnerships outside of our school community. So those partnerships with other mental health providers, with other social services, making sure that we are forging quality partnerships with them, and also forging a collaborative partnership within the walls of our school should there be any outside organizations or outside mental health providers that a student is needing access to. Our ultimate goal, as Dr. Montgomery just said, it is about ensuring that we are meeting the needs holistically of every single student at Lake Forest High School. They're unique, they have beautiful gifts, and we want to make sure that we're set up so that we could recognize those gifts and help support them. So I am going to actually pull from the executive summary that is going to be provided tomorrow, the exact words for process, people, platform, and partnership. This was actually something that Dr. Cates used as he went through and thought about student services, or audited our student services, audited our core team, audited our special services as well. He thought about these 4 prongs. With processes, we're referring to the operational mechanisms associated with the delivery of student services. So what are the processes, the operational processes we have in place? With people, of course, that's the group or the staff and other individuals involved in the delivery of those student services. In the platform, those refer to the infrastructure, so what are we using, what's our data tracking, what's our record keeping, and then partnerships includes those who are part of the communication networks necessary to deliver student services, to include parents as well. So you're going to see a lot about parent communication here and making sure that we are involving them early whenever we have concerns. All right. So the first and foremost process, establishing parent notification guidelines. When we received Dr. Cates' report, my team got to work on those things that we need to build in to start the school year. So we have built in a qualifying trigger, if you will, to reach out and work with our parents whenever they meet with a social worker. With special education minutes and those minutes that our social workers were providing, we want to make sure that we are prioritizing their minutes because they're actually written in the IEP. And then something that we also need to do is we need to think about in special education and multi-tiered systems of support, we have what we call a continuum of services. So a student might need access to something like just meeting with their dean one time. That's something that would be tier 1, very basic. You're having a problem, you meet with the dean. But as a student, it maybe has more needs. They might need something else. Like maybe that's when they need to meet with a social worker 3 times a week. You have a continuum. Maybe it's something in the middle, their counselor 2 times a week. You have a continuum of services. We did not have a clear continuum in place. So we're going to re-engage because at one point I'm told we did a clearer continuum of services. We have behavioral intervention plans for students who have unique behaviors that they're exhibiting. We need to make sure that we have quality training around how to implement those behavioral intervention plans. Also, something that we need to do is make sure that our 504 and IEP accommodations for testing are being delivered, especially for our standardized norm reference testing as well. Something that he recommended with regards to platform, this is actually a model that's used in some of our neighboring districts. I refer to it as the sub-school model, and that is where you take a dean, an admin assistant, psychologist, social worker, and counselors assigned to an alpha, and you actually put them in a suite together, and they're working together with that alpha. He recommended we consider that structure. I'm told we've had a team that has actually visited a neighboring school that has that type of a system in place, and we'll be interested, especially with the referendum, in working with our teachers and working with our faculty to see if that's going to be an opportunity that we would like to put in place. Anytime you have that sub-school, it's great for a student because if they're in need, if they have a challenge, they can just go to their sub-school office and there's an entire suite of people there who know their students because they're alpha split and can help to address concerns. Something else, multi-tiered systems of support. Dr. Cates, repeatedly stated that we have a robust system for multi-tiered systems. We have a number of tiered interventions. We have a great way that we're able to find students who are struggling and make sure that they get to the appropriate interventions. We have resource centers. We have parent contact within MTSS as well. But he's recommending that we actually build into, as a district, our budget, some funding for MTSS. There's actually not a budget line of funding for MTSS work. We just build that into the overall budget too. Partnership, and this is something that, again, came up over and over again, we need to improve parent communication, especially regarding crisis interventions and non-special education visits. So special education visits to our social services departments, those are written within the IEP. We have to report on those on the report cards for the IEP. But for students who do not have an IEP or a 504 that would warrant it, we have it now. We needed to make sure we had the trigger point where we were working with parents whenever a student was flagged as coming in. For us, that's 2 visits. So if a student comes in to our social services department twice, we want to make sure that the parent is aware. We've actually, in implementing that since the start of the school year, it's been very successful, and our social workers and psychologists, they appreciate they know this is the time whenever we're reaching out to parents. And then the other thing for MTSS, so that's the core team, those are the students in general education, whenever they're struggling in their classes, so that's all the way over to this side. As soon as they start struggling in their classes, we'll call the core team together, psychologists, dean of students, social workers, counselors. They'll meet together and talk about students who are academically struggling. We didn't have a great process to inform parents. We were talking about the students who were academically struggling. So making sure that we have parent contact happening there so the parent can support the work and support the interventions that we've put in place. All right. And again, these are kind of distilled down. There's more, of course, more detail in the report. All right, so more for mental health counseling. We need to have a succinct and streamlined way that we're logging what happens in our sessions when social workers are working with students, whether that be in those first 2 times and then they contact the parent, whether that be so that we can talk to an outside mental health provider and give them some of the information that we've been working with the student on, or whether that even be for an IEP, having that streamlined way we're logging what's occurring in our sessions. For special education, another process, really having that parent focus group in special education who's helping us as we re-engage a continuum of services, as we talk about ways we need to improve the special education services we provide, having a parent group that's also weighing in. Dr. Sturpin has had one for quite some time. I know Dr. Sasson met with some of those parents last year, but really having a very intentional way that we're making sure we're engaging parents as we begin to re-engage the continuum of services for special education. And again, you see here again for a process for parents in core team and for multi-tiered systems of support. Parents in core team making sure that we are talking to parents if we're talking about their students in core team. We reach out, we have ways we reach out with regards to attendance. We've streamlined that this year where it's just automatic after 5 absences. We just really need to get better about streamlining those processes too. Mental health counseling. This was something that was interesting when we saw it in Dr. Cates's report because we actually do have an annual review of crisis procedures. So what my team did is they just worked to look at, is the review sufficient, is it not, was it just not completed and it should have been? Maybe there was a holdover from COVID that came up in the data, not sure. But this is something with regards to crisis procedures, we should be working as a team every year to see if they're sufficient, if they're not. That's not just mental health crisis procedures, that's school-wide crisis procedures. So my team they re-engaged that this year and then with the intent to improve it each year. Multi-tiered systems of support publicly present a thorough examination of practices. So this is for us to, with what's going on in MTSS, something that was reported in the Cates report, is that a lot of parents don't understand what that is and what's going on. Like, what does that mean, tier 1, tier 2? You're not really engaging with us as much as we would hope if my student is in tier 1 because they're not doing well, or in tier 2 because they're not doing well. So we need to get out more. We've had some things built out on the website, but get out more and talk about what our multi-tiered systems of support are, what our core team is, and make sure the public is aware of it. And I think I've actually had conversations about that in this room, too. Something else for special education, expand the summer school offerings and programs. We did last year, and that was last summer. We actually added bridge courses, and we'll continue to do that. And then another one of his recommendations, and we're still working on this as a team, and that is peer counseling. We didn't implement it. We want to talk about it more. We want to talk to some other experts around it, because I do have some team members and some of the psychologists and some of the mental health providers we work with. There's a mixed bag on peer counseling. That's where the student is doing the counseling with the students and you train them. There's a mixed bag of desire to engage in that. So I want to make sure that whatever it is, we have something that's research-based and that we can implement with fidelity, because I think anytime you have a peer who's counseling another peer, it can go south fast if we don't do it correctly. So I know that there are examples that are outstanding. That would take me, that's going to take me some time. So as a team, we're talking about that. And then again, multi-tiered parent partnerships, we kept hearing that, especially whenever the student is starting to flag. And then for mental health counseling, just ensuring that we are proactively communicating. If we see an issue, we shouldn't be cutting the parent out of the issue. We need to be talking with the parent and working with the parent as well as the student to try to make sure that we have a home-school partnership as much as possible. And then also, if that student does have an outside mental health provider, we need to be working with that specialized mental health provider to ensure that we are implementing whatever skills he or she or they are learning somewhere else or from that mental health provider in the school community and vice versa. So we heard a lot about partnerships. So you see Dr. Cates, we have a quote from him up here. I'd like to read it. With this report illuminating the path ahead, Lake Forest High School is not just aiming for incremental improvements. The school is geared to redefine student services, championing a vision where every child's holistic needs are met, celebrated, and nurtured. Dr. Cates was a great choice for the board. He was a great choice for Lake Forest High School. He came in and he really wanted to hear all perspectives, and he came in very balanced in the end. And we were very appreciative of the recommendations, because they were recommendations that we as a team recognized probably needed to happen. We had more data, and then he also was able to give exemplars and examples for us to utilize as well. And with that, that ends my portion. Tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., we will see the full executive summary released with far more detail than I gave.
Any questions? I will just say, if there are, that's fine. But thank you so much. And I know how much time and energy it took. And just really appreciate the thoroughness and the scope, because it wasn't just looking at an event or two. It was really looking at and trying to re-engineer really what's there at the school for the betterment of the students and the families. So I applaud all of you, and I'm excited about where the direction we're taking this, so thank you. On to the liaison reports. So I have not spoken in a while on EdRed or legislative updates, and I wanted to share just a little bit on this because it's something I haven't given up yet in my new role as president. So I attached a few different pages from IASB and EdRed around mandates and updates and other types of things that I think will be helpful. And the reason I did this was, as we think about our budget, moving, I think, in total operation expenditures from about 48.5 million to now about 53 over the last 5 years. It's not a tremendous increase, but a lot of this is being driven by basically what is being told to us by the state that we must do. And also the influx of various students when they arrive, wherever it comes from in terms of the special ed support, because we are short from both the federal and the state government for about $2.5 million a year on special ed support and funding, because we just don't get much. And if you look at the funding that we do get, it's, as again, Whitney highlighted, it's about 3% of our revenue comes from the state and federal. So one of the things I wanted to highlight from ISB, and these are two attachments, but they basically highlight over the last 40 years the state mandates that have been put upon us. And you will see basically from 1982 to 2022, over 699 educational mandates that have been passed and put into law. So that is not a trivial number. And just if we take a little swing at this year in the spring, 23 new ones were added as well. So it is a significant list, and we've tried to make a little bit of headway in terms of our priorities from the tri-district perspective of what we're trying to establish at our legislative priorities. And we've been able to bring a few nice things forward. When we think about what's on our plate still left is one of the big issues around special ed funding and the identification of special ed. So that is a dialogue I was able to have with IASB this Monday, and we'll continue on with hopefully ISB and a few other parties as we will look to define what we can get done potentially in either reclassifications or designations or flexibility operationally that we can bring forward in the schools. So Aaron was kind enough, and Jenny Sturpin in the past, about kind of highlighting the particulars of what it is to Lake Forest that we're faced and challenged with. But a lot of people talk about waivers and other types of things that you can kind of get out of in terms of mandates that are within the school settings. In most cases, the mandates that we can get out of from a waiver, the solution is actually worse than the disease. So typically schools will not partake in the waiver because the additional reporting and notifications is far onerous than just living with what the state has given us. On the special ed side, there's some lovely surprises, which is you cannot get any waivers. So once children are designated within certain special ed or accommodation needs, those must be honored. And so I think it's threading the needle as we move forward as things not trying to add risk to students or the environment, as well as not trying to take away accommodations that are much needed for individuals, but trying to find a better way for both funding and an understanding of what else could be potentially written or waived within legislative going forward. So this is probably going to be a 2-3 year process, but we seem to have the attention of both IASB and EdRed in terms of interested parties of how to move this forward. So, so interesting conversations to start with, and we'll see where they go. But that's some of the stuff you can kind of see in the attachments of the legislative updates. And so with that, I would pass it on to John Venson and True North Education Cooperative.
Nothing to add to the superintendent's report this time. Just to comment, they are entering negotiations with their union this year. Their phase 1 project went well. It was successful. I think they were pleased with the results. Interestingly, phase 2 is on hold. And I think smartly, while they determine the value of what happened in phase 1, and hope to use that information to drive them through their phase 2 if they need it.
Great. Thanks, John. So we are going to step into the action items. And so what I'd like to do is take care of number 1 here, the adoption of the 2023-2024 final budget. And so may I have a motion to adopt the 2023-2024 final budget, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Do we need to discuss anything further on this?
Not unless the board has questions.
Any other questions? The budget? Okay. Thank you again, Whitney, for presenting and stepping in today. I know Jen missed it deeply. She would love to have been here. So.
Yeah, she did.
So thank you for your time and attention to it, and I appreciate you preparing what you prepared for us. So,
Of course, thank you.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Schabacher,
Aye.
Mr. Noble,
Aye.
Dr. Vinson,
Aye.
Mr. Burns,
Aye.
Ms. Davis,
Aye.
Mr. Weinbrenner.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Great, thanks. Can I have an approval motion to approve the fund balance report, please?
So moved.
Second.
Any comment on this that we want to share in terms of this is a standard protocol for us from the state, so I don't think there's much to explain here. May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Noble,
Aye.
Mr. Burns,
Aye.
Mr. Weinbrenner,
Aye.
Dr. Vinson,
Aye.
Dr. Schabacher,
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, so we are stepping into the comment and information around the looking at the bonds and its consideration. So should I read them first, or should we have Liz speak first?
I think we should have Liz go through her report first, and then see what questions you have for Liz.
Perfect.
And then hopefully then we can move to resolutions and the voting for 3 and
Perfect.
4.
So before we do that, then let me ask Liz Hennessy, our financial consultant, and give a little bit of a explanation. And this is a continuing discussion we've had over the last, I want to say, 2.5, maybe 3 months. Dewey and I were present with, as well as I think we workshopped on the topic and the issues. So this is kind of the final conclusion and the financial strategies that we explored. And so I'll turn it over to Liz to kind of outline, and then as the board has questions, please feel free to, throw them at Liz. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me tonight. So I'm starting this presentation. I apologize. The numbers are small if you're sitting in your seat, but hopefully you have it on your computer screen. The promise. This is what the board described to the community as the impact of the referendum. And this information was used all through the public information sharing. And this is for 105.7 million referendum bonds. And for the estimate that was provided well before current market conditions, we estimated an all-in true interest rate with a cushion, knowing that the Fed was increasing rates, of 5.78%, resulting in annual payments of about $9,128,000, and that was a 30-cent tax rate. And it impacted the owner of a $500,000 home by $474 a year for 20 years, and for the owner of a $1 million home, $974 a year for the 20-year payoff of the bonds. So I wanted to start with that. Here's a graphic of it. The blue bars represent the outstanding referendum debt service, which will be retired in levy year 26, and the green bars represent the payments on the new proposed 105.7 million. So now let's move to update on bond market and interest rates. This graph represents the historical AAA rated municipal market data index for tax-exempt bonds. So the dark line is a historical average since 1993. And the y-axis shows interest rates. The x-axis shows the year of maturity, all the way out to 30 years. So you can see that more normal shape of the yield curve where the shorter term rates are lower than the medium and longer term rates. And then the red line represents where interest rates were September 1st. So we have an inverted yield curve right now as a result of the Federal Reserve increasing rates 10 times and possibly going to be doing more of that. The goal is to bring inflation down to 2%, as you've, I'm sure, read in the newspaper, and we're not near that yet. So we anticipate more Fed action in the coming months. So those short-term rates are higher, but after year 7, the longer-term rates are lower than the historical average. So I think that's a good fact, since the majority of the principal is being paid over the 20 years. This next graph looks at U.S. Treasury rates. And you can see the historical line, the dark line, again, that more normal yield curve where short-term rates are lower and long-term rates are higher, versus the red line, which is where we are today with regard to Treasury rates. So you can see the short-term rates are up to 5.5% for the one-year rate. And all of those rates are higher than the historical average. So this represents an opportunity for the district to invest its funds per its investment rules, which are quite restrictive in the state of Illinois, but in Treasury bonds, which are going to yield much more because they're taxable, number one, and because of the Fed action, are much higher in the short term. So you have the chance to increase your investment earnings on your regular funds, which I think Whitney mentioned in your budget presentation are certainly up this year and going forward. So that's just a quick update on both the tax-exempt and the taxable markets. So for the 105.7 million, issuing it all at once at today's rates for AAA rated Lake Forest, Illinois school bonds results in annual payments around $8.2 million. I'll mention we included a 50 basis point cushion in these interest rates because we're always trying to be conservative, and we still have upward pressure on interest rates. So right now, we're looking at those annual payments, again, around $8,250,000 and a tax rate of 27 cents as opposed to 30 cents, which we talked about in the promise. This results in a lower tax impact for the $500,000 home of $431 and for the $1 million home of $887 per year over those 20 years. Here's a graph, looks very similar, but the bars are a little bit shorter, which is the good news. So just looking at a comparison here, we've got the promise that was talked about in the referendum information, the estimated amount, the $105.7 million, the interest rate, 5.78, the total estimated debt service at the time, $182.5 million, the average annual payments over the 20 years, $9,126,000. The first impact, of course, of this bond issue is going to be on the 23 levy and taxes, the first installment of which will happen in spring of 24, and the net increase on the $500,000 home and the $1 million home, $474 and $974 respectively, versus the proposed where we are now, even with that 50 basis point cushion, 4.62%, $165 million of total principal and interest over the life of the debt, and the impact on the home, $431 for the $500,000 home and $887, so on the $1 million home. So as you can see, right now, our proposed interest rates and impact are less than what were projected. So that's a great thing, and you know, we look at the possibility of rates continuing to go up. There's a meeting on September 20th. Most people think the Fed's going to hold at that meeting, but there is a chance a 25 rate increase. The next one after that is November 1st, where over 50% of the banks think now there's going to be a 50 basis point increase. So in order to avoid future interest rate risk, as your municipal advisor, I do recommend that you move forward with the issuance of the bonds and lock in these interest rates. So we're going to preserve fixed debt service payments that are less costly to the district and its taxpayers than what was promised at the time of the referendum. And it also maximizes the district's ability to earn interest on the investment of these proceeds to offset any additional cost escalation, which you could certainly experience in this construction environment, and continue to maintain the district's facilities. So that's my recommendation. And just to take you through the calendar, we started talking about this in June. We had a meeting on August 8th with the board to discuss the issuance options and get any additional questions. Again, on the 15th, we reviewed the referendum bond issuance, method of sale, and investment strategies. And we reviewed both the reimbursement resolution and the parameters bond resolution, which are the next two action items on the agenda. So we're here tonight doing this, reviewing these resolutions. We're going to have our bond rating meeting on September 18th. We will get that bond rating back on September 25th. We would like to sell the bonds via competitive sale on October 3rd, if all goes smoothly with market conditions and with the approval of the board delegates, and then close and the district receive the proceeds on November 1st. So that's our proposed calendar. And before I get to your questions, just to speak to the two resolutions in front of you, firstly, you'll look at the reimbursement resolution. The purpose of this resolution is to allow the district to reimburse itself with the proceeds of a bond issue, any cost incurred up to 60 days prior to the issuance of the bonds, and going forward, after the approval of the reimbursement resolution, really up to 3 years. So it allows you to take in the costs you've incurred so far and will prior to the issuance of the bonds and pay yourself back for those costs. The next resolution is the parameters bond resolution. So this resolution authorizes the issuance of the referendum bonds within certain parameters. The amount, of course, is $105,700,000. The maximum interest rate is 5%. The maximum annual principal payment is $8.25 million. The maximum annual debt service is $8.5 million. These bonds are subject to optional redemption prior to maturity, so you will have the opportunity to refund those for interest rate savings should market change over the next 8 to 9 years. The call date is out 8 years. We've talked about this at least once, I think. Unlike a mortgage, municipal bonds cannot be refunded any time on a tax-exempt basis. The laws are such in federal tax law that they can only be refunded at the call date on a tax-exempt basis, and investors do not accept a call date really shorter than 8 years. So we're looking at 8 or 9 years on that call. But the bonds go out to 20 years, so that is going to represent a refunding opportunity for the majority of the bonds. The repayment term is 20 years. The parameters resolution authorizes either a competitive or negotiated sale. As we've spoken about in the past, we're recommending a competitive bond sale, given the expectation that the district's going to maintain its super strong AAA rating. So during the sale of the bonds, we cannot move forward without the approval of the board delegates, which are specified in Section 8 of the resolution. And those board delegates are identified as the board president and the chief operating officer of the district. So just procedurally, we will have a pre-marketing call, a bid call, and we will need their formal approval and signature prior to accepting the winning bid on the bonds. And this parameters resolution is good for 6 months until March 12th of '24. So, been talking a while. Hopefully you've saved your questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz. So just a couple notes just to bring people back in terms of us meeting and sharing a little bit, and the philosophy that I took, and I think the board in thinking about the district, is that we are not a bank, we're not a financial institution. So when I think of removing risk to the community and to the district, creating as much certainty as possible for us to succeed in the path we wish to take in terms of the project and the finances, that's really a grounding principle for me. And so I think we talked about two different, basically simple strategies for the community. One was, do we do all of it now, or do we do it just in time? And under a normal yield curve, without really any value to doing it immediate, some type of just in time would have probably been the logical choice. The risk to that, as we talked and understand about it, really is that what might happen in the future in 2 years or in 4 years when we have to issue the other issuances, the cost of issuances, and what's that downstream do in terms of trying to refinance, because basically you start the clock over and that it's 8 years from that last issuance. So those are some fundamental things as we looked about and we modeled. But with the inverted yield curve, it affords us a lot more certainty and simplicity. So it affords us the ability actually to take all the bonds at one time, take a small amount of interest that we can actually lock in and take. We can't make money per se, and like a banker would or somebody else, but there is some interest we're legally allowed to take. Anything over that amount, we actually have to hand back to the government. So there's a control in terms of how that gets invested and why it gets invested. And then effectively, that margin, as you mentioned, does afford us any overruns in terms of what the project might cost in terms of availability and flexibility for us. And then the other nice thing is that it does start the clock on the 8 years for us to refinance as need be. So if the yield curve comes back to something where we're looking at a similar yield curve to years past, where it might have been 3% or something of that nature, we could take advantage of those in times and lower the taxpayers' the taxes would be adjusted down based on what we're actually being outlaying. So some of the positives is that we went very conservative to the community, to probably our detriment a little bit of how much this whole project might cost in interest and principal. And now what we're able to see actually is closer to it, what the reality might be and what we can actually take on. So I feel very positive that we are hopefully putting, with your advice, Liz, the community in the best light possible with the least amount of risk in terms of the interest fluctuations of what might occur in the next 2 to 4 years. And we're taking that kind of off the table and effectively being able to enjoy hopefully a positive in 8 years to maybe being able to refinance and lower the burden to the community. But I really appreciate being able to explore those alternatives with you and the work you did to help us out. And so that was kind of just how I was viewing it in my conversations with Dewey, as we really looked at kind of the different opportunities in the project. And that's why we really kind of stepped away from the just-in-time, because there's just too many added risks and responsibilities that I feel, yes, we could manage, but the uncertainty of what those might be, not being really a financial institution ourselves, it's not our job. And I think freeing up the time and also the certainty of it seemed to make a lot of sense to me. So I think that's where I landed on our conversations with it. So that's my little speech on this topic. But if any other questions that you'd like to raise with Liz or have additional clarity, please.
Liz, you were good enough to provide the proposed calendar, and I was curious, and we won't hold you to this because the world is a strange place, but do you think these dates you have in the future are realistic? Do you think that week of October 3rd, that if everything goes smoothly, we'll be able to really know what our locked-in interest costs are going to be?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. We want to move. We want to drive straight forward and get this in the market, in my opinion. It's uncertain, as you know. We see the variability every day. And so I think locking this down will be very important. I mean, 6 months ago, a lot of people said, we're going to be in recession. No, it's coming, you know. All these rate increases, it's going to turn the economy down. We're not there. Our market update with our Raymond James people this week talked about the fact that they see higher rates for a while yet. And so I think waiting is going to hurt us in the short term.
One of the things I asked in our meetings was for you to share with you. I think you did, and I'm not sure if it's found its way into the board stuff, so I did want to call it out. So the work that we've done to try to keep our financial house in order, some of it is the work done here by Jen and her team, but it's also the proximity of where we are and that opportunity as well, to be fair. But having that AAA bond rating and not putting that at risk, I think as you shared, it was somewhere between 10 to 15 basis points in terms of going down to a double A.
Yes, yes, and I think it was about $1.4 million, $1.3 million over the life of the bonds, just in interest for your saving because of your strong bond rating.
And so that fact of where we maintain ourselves and showing that, as well as then I think the idea of showing and presenting a large bond offering versus incremental ones that might be at 20 or 30 million in a just-in-time approach, as we also talked about, is much more appetizing to the market, so that effectively we could, in theory, we'll find out when we find out, but get better competition and better interest based on us being a AAA and the certainty of that for the investors, but then also that we're putting something on the table that is of substantive size.
Yes, very true. Size is important these days for investors.
Any other questions or comments for Liz? Okay. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the depth and time. I know it was significant, and I know it's obviously what you do, so I do very much appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Like to move on to then item 3 and 4, please. So the approval for consideration and the action on the resolution expressing official intent regarding the certain capital expenditures to be reimbursed from proceeds of an obligation to be issued by the district. So may I have a motion to approve the approval for consideration and action?
So moved.
Second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Dr. Vinson?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Noble?
Aye.
Mr. Weinbrenner?
Aye.
Dr. Schabacher?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Item number 4, may I have a motion to approve the consideration and action on the resolution providing for the issue of not to exceed 105.7 million general obligation school bonds series 2023 for the purpose of altering, repairing, renovating, and equipping the Lake Forest High School facilities, providing for the levy of taxes to pay said bonds, and authorizing the sale of said bonds to the purchaser thereof.
Moved.
Second.
And before I just want to make a quick note before we vote on this. I know Jenny would have actually liked to be here, so I know Jenny's answer is not. Our thoughts and prayers are with her. But I wanted to, this has been a big, long journey. So I believe Jenny and I served on the master facility plan some 4.5 years ago. We first started on the board. And so getting this through COVID and all the other things, I just want to express my thanks to the past and current administration and all the folks that have put energy behind this and helping us move this forward. So may I have a roll call vote, please?
Dr. Vinson?
Aye.
Mr. Weinbrenner?
Aye.
Mr. Noble?
Aye.
Dr. Schabacher?
Aye.
Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And at this time, we look at the consent agenda. If any item may be removed with the consent agenda with a request to the board member. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items, including approval of, do I need to read all these or no? Sorry.
John, before we
Sorry.
move forward, I apologize. It's been such a busy meeting that I didn't have a chance to ask. Can we pull the finance charter out? There are a couple, I think it's dated, and address that at the next meeting. If we could, because I think we need to tighten that one up a little bit.
Right, so there we go. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items, including 1 through 3 and 5, 6, 7, 8, 5 through 9.
So
Moved.
second.
May I have a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Dr. Vinson?
Aye.
Mr. Burns?
Aye.
Mr. Noble?
Aye.
Mr. Weinbrenner?
Aye.
Dr. Schabacher?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. FOIA requests, Pete Jansen, 7 of 14 completed, Frank McCormick, 3 of 3 completed, Jeff Brinkett, 1 of 2 completed. At this point, I'd like to offer up public participation as a second opportunity for the board, for the community if they would like to. Is there anyone that would like to speak at this time? There we go. Didn't know which time, so thank you for staying and thank you for doing that. So you know the rules, but I'll let you please commence. Thank you.
Tonight, I'd like to publicly thank the board for hiring an independent evaluator to improve the mental health care supports in our district. The mental health care of our children is so important, and it's imperative we get it right in schools. It's not easy to do an internal examination, but you and Dr. Montgomery especially have shown great leadership and commitment to doing what's best for our kids. Much of what I heard tonight, including notifying parents after 2 visits, is a sign of true partnership and goes a long way in supporting not only our children, but our families. There are exceptions written in the Mental Health Care Code, so I hope to learn more about how those are determined and your procedures. As you continue to improve, I hope you will make sure our supports align with best practices. And I encourage you to continue to evaluate our school's high number of calls to DCFS. Based on FOIA data going From DCFS, going back to 2017, Lake Forest High School has had the highest rate of mandated reporter calls of districts adjacent to ours: Libertyville, New Trier, Stevenson, Highland Park, and even Hinsdale. Mandated reporting was designed to be used when child abuse is suspected to have occurred or is imminent. Government research shows that a high rate of mandated reporter calls is associated with communities that have high rates of violence, crime, poverty, and unemployment, as well as low education levels. I am not saying that challenges can't exist in our town, but those are not the common characteristics I would use to describe Lake Forest. Additionally, these mandated reporters have only been accurate 5 to 10% of the time, with 90 to 95% being unfounded. That means almost all calls placed were unnecessary. I hope this board continues to ask why Lake Forest High School has such a high rate of unfounded calls. What is our mandated call procedure? Are we missing checks and balances? Does our district need additional training on what reasonable suspicion really is? Is our staff sufficiently trained for our children's complex medical diagnoses? Teenage mental health is complex, and even trauma-informed schools lack the information on attachment trauma. My organization, Facts for Safe Families, is working to ensure our school districts have the proper training to strengthen our children and families. I have submitted to the board an adoption competency training program for school mental health professionals that I hope you will consider. With this training, you now have the opportunity to be a leader in the latest research and best practices for working with not only adopted and foster children, but any child experiencing grief and loss. This program is free, 15 hours, web-based, and designed for counselors, deans, psychologists, and social workers. I thank you for your time, all of your efforts, and I will leave you with one of my favorite quotes by renowned adoption expert and author of The Primal Wound, Nancy Verrier. She says, "One of the cruelest myths of our time is that of the perfect family and perfect childhood. If our family, whether adoptive or biological, is not wonderful, we call it dysfunctional. As a therapist, I know there are many dysfunctional families, but most families, although not perfect, are not dysfunctional. They are messy, chaotic, and confusing, but let's reserve the term dysfunctional in those family situations that are truly so." Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any others? All right. Thank you for that. Announcements. Tuesday, September 19th, District Education Committee is meeting at Lake Forest East Campus, room 109. Tuesday, September 19th, the Joint Policy Committee meets at 5 p.m. You guys are going to have fun, West Campus. Thursday, September 28th, District 115 Finance and Ops Committee will be meeting here at West Campus at 7:30. Monday, October 9th, Columbus Day, no school for students and staff. Tuesday, October 10th, will be our next Board of Education meeting at 7 p.m. here in this room. And with that, may I have a motion to adjourn the Lake Forest Community High School District 115 Board meeting for September 12th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
May I have a voice vote, please? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.